Standard NS2A is multiply rational numbers, and all of standard NS2 is about multiplying and dividing with rational numbers. We're going to start with problem number 1. Salim had to withdraw $28.50 from his bank account every 5 weeks to pay for a purchase. What number represents the change in his bank account? Well, he's withdrawing money from his account, so that indicates that he is subtracting or deducting $28.50 every week for 5 weeks. So we're going to multiply that by 5. So a negative times a positive is a negative 142.5, which if we think of this in terms of money, it's a negative $142.50. Number 2, which expressions have products that are positive? Select all that apply. So I'm just going to go through here and think. I've got a positive times a negative, which is a negative, times a positive, which is still a negative, times a positive, which is still a negative. So I've got a negative value, so that one doesn't work. Then I have a negative times a positive, which is a negative, times a negative, which is a positive, times a positive, so it stays a positive. The next one, I have a negative times a negative, which is a positive, times a negative is a negative, times a negative is a positive, times a positive stays a positive. The next one, I have a positive times a negative, which is a negative, times a negative, which is a positive. The last one, I have a positive times a negative, which is a negative, times a positive is still a negative, times a positive is still a negative. One thing you might notice is that anytime you have an odd number of negatives being multiplied, it's going to remain negative because you need an even number of negative values multiplied that equal positive pairs. Number 3, what is the value of the expression negative 3.5 times 4/5? Notice that one of these is a decimal, the other is a fraction. So we need to change them to the same types of numbers. We could make them both fractions or we could make them both decimals. Since 4/5 is a fraction that will change to a terminating decimal, I'll write the decimal form. So I've got negative 3.5 times 4 divided by 5 is 0.8. And I can just multiply that out. A negative times a positive is a negative. And I can use a calculator to get that's negative 2.8. Number 4, which expression is equivalent to negative 2 times 3/8? One thing I'm going to notice is that the result of a negative times a positive would be a negative value. So if I look at the first one, I have a positive times a positive, which is a positive, so that doesn't work. The next one's a positive times a negative, which is a negative. And the numbers, notice ignoring the signs, they're the same numbers. It's 2 times 3/8 as the original expression was. It's just the negative sign is in a different place, but it is equivalent. The next one has the same story. The negative sign's in a different place, but it's still a positive 2 times a negative 3/8, so this is equivalent. The next one's a negative times a negative, which is a positive, so that does not work. And then this last one is a little confusing because we have a negative 2 times a negative 3 over negative 8. But this negative 3 over negative 8 is a negative divided by a negative, which is a positive 3/8. So we still get negative 2 times 3/8, which once again is negative, and it is equivalent to the original expression. Number 5, a hot air balloon is descending vertically at a rate of 18 1/4 feet per minute. If it continues at this rate, what number represents the vertical change of the balloon after 3 minutes? So it's descending 18 1/4 feet per minute, and we're talking about 3 minutes. So it's descending or dropping 18 1/4 per minute for 3 minutes. Now, I could work with multiplying with fractions, but anytime I have a fraction I can convert to a decimal, such as a terminating decimal specifically, that's so much easier to work with. I know 1/4 is 0.25, so I'm going to multiply negative 18.25 times 3 to get negative 54.75, and that is a total of feet, and it is a drop, so that's why it's a negative 54.75 feet. Standard NS2B is about dividing rational numbers. I'm going to start with this first problem. Select all the expressions that are equivalent to negative 15 divided by positive 23. So notice that all our answer choices are in fraction form, which just mean division. So this first one is like saying 15 divided by negative 23. And notice that it's still 15 divided by 23, ignoring the signs. And our original problem was a negative divided by a positive, which is a negative. And here we have a positive divided by a negative, which is a negative. Anytime you're multiplying or dividing two integers of the same signs, your answer is positive. When you multiply or divide two integers of different signs, your answers are negative. So the first one is equivalent, as is the second one, because it's just a negative 15 over 23. The problem with this third one is the order swapped. The fourth one is a positive, so that is incorrect. And then the last one, the order is swapped. Number 3, the temperature decreased 20.8 degrees Fahrenheit over 6.5 hours. What value represents the average temperature change per hour? So we look at the temperature change per or divided by the hours. So it decreased, or negative 20.8 divided by 6.5 hours. And when we divide that out, a negative divided by positive is a negative, and we get negative 3.2, and that change is in degrees Fahrenheit per hour. Number 4, which expression is undefined? Undefined would be, an example of undefined would be something that divides by 0. You could say 0 divided by a number, such as 0 divided by 5 is 0, but choice D is divided by 0. Number 6, which fraction is equivalent to 8 over negative 13? So notice that we have one negative sign, so it's positive divided by a negative, which is a negative. Choices A and B are, the numerator and denominator are flipped, so those definitely do not work. Even ignoring signs, it wouldn't matter because those do not work. Choice C, we have a negative divided by a negative, which is a positive. So that one doesn't work. And then choice D, we have a negative, and that is the only one that is equivalent. Standard NS2C is focused on properties of numbers dealing with multiplying and dividing. We're going to start with number 3. Allie deposits $412.60, deposits her $412.60 paycheck and withdraws $40 cash from her bank account each week. If her starting balance was $315.85, what is her balance after 3 weeks? So we see this, that for 3 weeks, she is depositing $412.60 and then subtracting $40 every week. Her starting balance was $315.85, so she started with $315.85. And we want to know the balance after 3 weeks. So I'm just going to follow through with order of operations. It's not the only way we could do this, but it would be just a straightforward way that always works. So 3 times this group in the parentheses, $412.60 minus 40, means that she is actually adding a total of $372.60 to her account every week, because that's really in effect what she's gaining. And then we add $315.85 to that. Now, for 3 weeks, she's doing this. So she's gaining in 3 weeks $1,117.80. And she started with $315.85. So she will end up with $1,433.65 in her account balance after 3 weeks. Number 4, which of the following expressions can be evaluated using the distributive property? Select all that apply. Distributive property takes a number outside the parentheses that's multiplied by the parentheses and distributes that number to each term within the parentheses, which of course are separated by addition or subtraction. So the second and the third choices both would show distributive property because we can distribute 2 to each term in that choice B, the second choice. And we can also distribute 1/5 to each term in C, the third choice. Number 8, Gregory pays his phone bill each month. If the total amount he paid for 3 months is $149.97, which expression represents the change in his account balance each month in dollars? So his account balance is decreasing $149.97 over 3 months. So this is talking about the change in his balance each month. So it decreased $149.97 over 3 months. And so that's a change of negative $49.99 in 1 month. Answer choice D. Standard NS2D is about converting between fractions and decimals. So number 1, 5 out of 12 apple trees in a small orchard are taller than 9 feet. What is the decimal equivalent of the number of apple trees taller than 9 feet? Well, it said it was 5 out of 12. That little phrase out of tells you we're talking about a fraction. The total number of trees is 12, and then the amount out of that is 5. So we want to find the decimal equivalent. So we are simply going to divide 5 divided by 12. You can use a calculator. And you get 0.416, and the 6 repeats, so we're going to place a bar over that digit, and that is answer choice B. Number 3, what is the decimal equivalent of 4 and 8/9? So we know that we have 4, and this value is what is before the decimal because it is our whole number. So we have 4 point something. And then 8/9, we are simply going to divide 8 divided by 9, and we get 0.8 repeating. So 4.8 repeating is the decimal equivalent. Number 9, what is the fraction equivalent of 6.24? Write your answer as a simplified improper fraction. So we have this value 6.24. So 6 is our whole number, and then 24 is the numerator of the fraction. And we look at the place value of the last digit. So I'm going to think here just a minute. This last digit, this 4, it is in the hundredths place. So that means this is over 100. Now I'm just going to rewrite this because 24 over 100 does reduce. You could quickly notice that they're both even numbers, but we want to think of what's the largest number they'll both divide by, and they'll both divide by 4. So we get 6 over 25. Now, normally that is the form that we want to write these in, is a mixed number, but this specifically says to change it to an improper fraction. So we could find out how many groups of 25 are in this whole number 6, which to do that we can just multiply 25 times 6, which is 150, plus the remainder 6, which is 156, and that's over the same denominator 25 that didn't change, and we are done there. Number 10, select all statements that are true. The first is a decimal that repeats can be written as a fraction. That is true. Decimals that repeat and decimals that terminate can always be written as fractions. The next one says a decimal that terminates in 0 is not rational. If it is a decimal that terminates, it is a rational number. So that's not true. The next 3.753841 is a rational number. Well, it ended. It terminates. If it is a terminating decimal, it is a rational number. The next is 2/3 is a rational number. Rational has the word ratio in it, which just means fraction. If it can be written as a fraction, that's the definition of a rational number. The last one says a decimal that does not repeat or terminate is rational. That's not true. If it does not repeat and does not terminate, it is irrational. Number 11, Kai eats 22 of 24 grapes. What's the decimal equivalent of the number of grapes she ate? Well, out of her total 24, she ate 22 grapes. So that little word of, we could even call that out of. It would be worded the same way. It would mean the same thing as out of 24 grapes. And so now we're just dividing. We get 22 divided by 24, which is 0.916 with the 6 repeating. That is answer choice C.